Fellow history buffs, what if I told you that the missing zeros in your bank balance today were actually calculated by a group of corporate elites in a smoke-filled room way back in 1974? You see, we're peeling back the layers of a financial crime 50 years in the making. While you struggle with skyrocketing rent and stagnant wages, the elites want you to believe it's just, bad luck. But as we dig into the archives, a darker reality emerges, one where your poverty was the plan. Stay with me here, because by the end of this investigation, you're going to see the exact moment the middle class was sold for parts. I mean, why did the entire world change in one specific year? To understand the heist, we first have to look at the world before the locks were picked. For decades after the Second World War, the social contract was basically written in stone. As workers became more productive, their paychecks grew in lockstep. It was a golden age where a single income could buy a home, a car, and a future, right? But by 1974, the ink on that contract began to vanish. If you look at the data, 1974 stands as a jagged scar on the timeline of human history. This is the year the great decoupling began. Imagine a graph where productivity and wages have been climbing together like soulmates for 3 years for 30 years. Then, suddenly, they snap apart. Productivity continues to rocket toward the stratosphere, but wages flatline, beginning a 50-year crawl through the dirt. That massive, yawning chasm between how much value you produce and how much you actually get to keep. That is the scene of the crime. This wasn't an accident of the invisible hand or some simple dip in the market. No. It was a calculated betrayal. Well, the public...
But let's take a look at the world our grandparents lived in. In the 1950s and 60s, the golden age wasn't a myth. I mean, a single income could actually buy a house, a car, and a college education for the kids. The official story says that system simply broke under its own weight. But as we dig deeper into the archives and blow the dust off suppressed documents, a far more sinister picture emerges. Investigative history suggests the system didn't just fail, it was dismantled, while the public was looking the other way. Think of the global economy as a high-performance vehicle. The official version of history wants you to believe the car just ran out of gas during a long uphill climb. But when you lift the hood and examine the blueprints being drafted in 1974, you realize the truth is much darker. They didn't just run out of fuel. They took the entire engine, moved it to a private garage, and left the rest of us sitting in the driveway wondering why the wheels wouldn't turn. The question we have to ask ourselves is, who was holding the wrench? While the public was distracted by news of gas lines and...
This was the moment the line between productivity and pay suddenly snapped. You see, before 1974, as a worker's output increased, their paycheck grew in tandem. But look at the charts after that year, and you see that connection severed permanently. The productivity line shoots upward toward the ceiling, while the wage line stays stubbornly, agonizingly flat. Why did this disconnect happen? I mean, why did the system choose to extract wealth from the very people who created it? The answer lies in the fine print of that forgotten 1974 memo, which laid the groundwork for the shift from gold-backed stability to the volatile world of fiat manipulation. They knew that by uncoupling the currency from tangible value, they could expand the money supply at will, creating a treadmill of perpetual debt that the average citizen could never truly outrun. But as we peel back the layers of this 1974 pivot, we find something even more sinister hidden in the footnotes of these corporate records. It turns out that this shift wasn't just about money. It was about control. However, there was one detail in these...
Look, you aren't struggling because you're bad with money. You're struggling because your life was budgeted by a committee of men in 1974 who viewed your future paycheck as their personal collateral. But as we've dug further into these files, we realized the extraction wasn't the end goal. It was just the fuel for something much more disturbing. Because, fellow history buffs, there was one specific paragraph in that memo that explains exactly what they plan to do when the debt bubble finally bursts. And it's a scenario that is unfolding right outside your window at this very moment. Fellow history buffs, it's finally time we face the coldest truth of all. You know that number staring back at you from your banking app? The one that keeps you up at 2 in the morning, wondering where it all went wrong? Well, it's not a reflection of your lack of hustle. I mean, it's not a personal failure, and it's certainly not an accident. It is a feature of a machine that was built while your parents were still in high school. See, that 1974 memo, it wasn't a warning for the elites to fix the future, right? It was their instruction manual on how to own it. We've been conditioned to believe that inflation, stagnant wages, and the vanishing middle class are just natural ebbs and flows of a chaotic market. But as we've seen in these files, there is nothing natural about it. Your struggle is quite literally their success. I mean, every ounce of pressure you feel today was calculated by a committee of men 50 years ago who viewed your future paycheck as